Daniel Carter woke up in an unfamiliar medical facility with the kind of disorientation that suggested he'd been unconscious for a while. The ceiling was wrong, too high, with lighting that was slightly off in spectrum from what human facilities used. The medical equipment surrounding his bed was elegant but clearly not human design. His last clear memory was of his research vessel experiencing catastrophic systems failure. Life support failing, emergency protocols activated, consciousness slipping away as he sent out distress signals he wasn't sure anyone would receive in time. Apparently someone had. The transparent wall showed beings moving through corridors who were definitely not human. Tall, elegant, with bioluminescent markings that shifted colors as they moved. Daniel's xenobiology training kicked in. Sireny. He'd studied them academically, knew they maintained limited diplomatic and trade relations with humanity, but he'd never met one in person, which meant he was in Sireny space, in what appeared to be an advanced medical facility, and someone had rescued him from his failing ship. Better than dying alone in deep space. Considerably better. When medical staff entered to check on him, moving with efficient professionalism while largely ignoring his attempts at questions, Daniel tried to assess his situation. They were treating him well. His injuries from the ship failure were clearly being addressed, but they wouldn't answer questions about where he was or what happened next beyond that. The one who claimed rescue rights will address your situation personally. That phrasing bothered him. Claimed rescue rights suggested something beyond simple humanitarian aid. Several hours passed with Daniel recovering physically but growing increasingly anxious. He was provided food, clothing adapted for human proportions, access to a small private space, but no clear answers. Then she arrived. The woman who entered his room commanded attention immediately. Tall even by Sireny standards, bioluminescent markings in patterns that suggested high status, dressed in formal attire that looked expensive and important. She dismissed the medical staff and studied Daniel with an intensity that made him genuinely uncomfortable. "You're recovered sufficiently for this conversation," she said in perfect standard. "I am Lyra of House Meridian. I claimed rescue rights when my vessel encountered your failing ship. Under Sireny law and custom, this creates certain obligations and privileges. I'm grateful for the rescue," Daniel said carefully, his xenoanthropology training warning him this conversation was heading somewhere complicated. "I'd like to contact human diplomatic authorities to arrange appropriate compensation and formal thanks. Compensation is not required. However, there are cultural obligations that must be addressed." Lyra moved closer. Sireny rescue rights tradition states that one who saves a life in deep space can claim bond right with the rescued if no other primary bonds exist. You are unmarried, unbonded, and without close family according to your ship's records. Daniel felt his stomach drop. "I'm sorry, what exactly is bond right?" "The right to form primary partnership bond, marriage in your cultural terminology." She delivered this with complete seriousness. "I am claiming this right. You will become my bonded partner and be formally joined to House Meridian. You can't just, that's not how consent works. You can't claim someone as a spouse because you rescued them. Under Sireny law, rescue rights are ancient tradition. You would not be alive without my intervention. The bond claim is my legal right." Her markings shifted to colors Daniel didn't recognize. "However, I am aware that humans have different customs, so I will offer you choice. You may accept the bond willingly, which would be preferable. Or you may refuse, in which case I will invoke formal bond claim through Sireny legal channels, which will be less pleasant but will achieve the same result." Daniel stared at her. "You're giving me the choice between agreeing to marry you or being legally forced to marry you. That's not actually a choice. It is the choice our customs allow. I would prefer your willing acceptance, but I will not surrender my rescue rights regardless." Her expression softened slightly. "I understand this is overwhelming. You may have time to adjust, but the outcome is not negotiable. You will become my bonded partner. The only variable is whether you accept willingly or resist until legal processes compel your acceptance. Can I contact human diplomatic authorities? You may contact them. They will confirm that rescue rights are recognized legal tradition under interstellar law, and that human authorities have no jurisdiction to override Sirene customs applied to humans who voluntarily entered Sirene space. Daniel's training told him she was probably right. He'd been conducting research in a sector where Sirene authority was recognized by treaty. I need time to think. You have 3 days to adjust to your circumstances. Then you will provide your answer, willing acceptance or resistance that requires formal proceedings. Lyra moved toward the door, then paused. I did not save your life merely to claim bond right, though that is my legal privilege. I saved you because leaving someone to die when rescue is possible would be unconscionable. But having saved you, I choose to exercise my rights. I hope you will come to understand this is not punishment, but opportunity. After she left, Daniel sat processing the most surreal conversation of his life. He'd just been given 3 days to decide whether to willingly marry an alien woman he'd just met, or be legally compelled to marry her anyway. His first call was to human diplomatic authorities. Their response confirmed his fears. Rescue rights were recognized legal tradition, Sirene law had jurisdiction, and human diplomatic channels couldn't override it. Your best option is to negotiate terms that make the arrangement tolerable rather than fighting legal proceedings you'll lose, the diplomatic attaché told him. Daniel had 3 days to figure out how to handle an impossible choice. Daniel spent the first day trying to find any loophole or diplomatic solution. Every conversation with human authorities led to the same conclusion. He was subject to Sirene law in Sirene space. Rescue rights were legally recognized, and no one could extract him from the situation. He researched Sirene marriage bonds extensively. What he learned was that they weren't purely romantic relationships like human marriages often were. They were legal and social contracts involving shared status, mutual obligation, alliance between families or houses. The bonds were typically arranged for political or social advantage, though modern Sirene culture also recognized partnerships formed by mutual choice. Rescue bond claims were ancient tradition, rare in modern practice but still legally valid. The logic was that someone who saved your life had proven their commitment to your welfare and earned the right to claim you as partner. Sirene marriages were not easily dissolved. They were considered lifetime commitments with severe social and legal consequences for breaking them. On the second day, Lyra returned to check on his adjustment. I've been informed you're researching Sirene partnership customs, she observed. That's wise. I'm trying to understand why you're doing this, Daniel said directly. You claim it's your legal right, but you don't have to exercise that right. Why force this? Lyra was quiet, her markings shifting through patterns Daniel was starting to recognize as thoughtful consideration. Because I am the last of House Meridian's direct line. My family died in the plague outbreak 5 years ago. I have status, wealth, position, but I have no close family, no primary bonds. Sirene society expects me to establish such bonds. So this is about social pressure. Partially, but also because I do not wish to form bonds through traditional arrangement processes where families negotiate partnerships for political advantage. When I reviewed your records after the rescue, I recognized opportunity. You're unmarried, unbonded, and you're a xenoanthropologist, someone who would understand cultural complexities rather than being completely lost. So I'm convenient because I study alien cultures. You're suitable because you have the background to navigate this situation with intelligence, and your records suggest you're someone of character and capability. She met his eyes. I am trying to balance respect for your cultural background with adherence to my own. That you find this inadequate is regrettable, but it doesn't change our situation. They talked for over an hour. Daniel started seeing past his panic to understand Lyra's position. She wasn't a villain, she was someone navigating her own cultural obligations, using legal traditions that seemed draconian to him, but were normal in her context. If I accept willingly, what does that actually look like? Standard Sireni partnership obligations. Shared living space. I would grant you status within House Meridian. We would represent ourselves as bonded partners socially, and we would support each other's endeavors. She paused. I would not demand physical intimacy you're uncomfortable with. Sireni bonds are not primarily about sexual relations, but I would expect loyalty, partnership in managing household and social obligations, and commitment to the bond's permanence. And if we're completely incompatible, then we navigate that difficulty together, as bonded partners must. She was honest. Sireni bonds require extreme circumstances or mutual agreement for dissolution. But most bonds develop into functional partnerships given time and effort. On the third day, Daniel had wrestled with his options constantly. Accept willingly and try to make the best of it. This preserved some agency. Refuse and fight through legal proceedings he'd lose. This was principled but futile. Try to escape, which would probably fail and burn any possibility of positive relationship. When Lyra arrived for his answer, Daniel had prepared a response. I'll accept the bond willingly, with conditions. Her markings shifted to colors that might indicate surprise. What conditions? First, that you acknowledge to human authorities that while this is legal, it was not my free choice. I want it on record that I'm accepting under duress. Acceptable. Second, that we establish explicit terms about personal autonomy. I'm not becoming property. Sireni bonds are partnerships, not ownership. We can formalize explicit terms. Third, that we approach this as genuine partners trying to build something functional rather than just fulfilling legal obligations. Lyra moved closer, her expression showing warmth for the first time. Those terms are acceptable. They suggest you're approaching this with maturity I respect. She extended her hand. Welcome to House Meridian, Daniel Carter. I hope this partnership proves more positive than circumstances suggest. Daniel accepted the gesture, feeling like he was jumping off a cliff and hoping for water instead of rocks. He just agreed to marry an alien woman he barely knew because the alternative was being forced into the same outcome. As Lyra explained the next steps, formal ceremony, adoption into House Meridian's registry, integration into her household, Daniel reflected that 3 days ago he'd been a researcher conducting routine surveys. Now he'd agreed to marry an alien aristocrat because the alternative was being legally compelled to marry her anyway. Whether that was pragmatism or capitulation, he wasn't entirely sure. Probably both. The formal bonding ceremony took place within a week, conducted according to Sireni customs with minimal outside attendance. Daniel learned that Sireni ceremonies were elaborate affairs involving family witnesses, exchange of status markers, and formal vows of partnership. In their case, with no family present, the ceremony was witnessed by household staff and officials required for legal registration. The ceremony felt more like a business contract being formalized than a wedding. The vows they exchanged were about practical partnership, mutual support, shared status, loyalty to each other's interests. After the ceremony, Daniel was formally registered as part of House Meridian, which granted him legal status and protections he wouldn't have otherwise. Lyra explained this was actually significant. As her bonded partner, he had rights he wouldn't possess as just a rescued human. The first weeks were awkward as they established routines. Lyra's household was substantial, staff who managed the estate, advisors who handled business interests, social obligations that came with her status. Daniel was introduced as her bonded partner, generating curiosity and skepticism from Sireni social circles. Lyra navigated the complications with confidence, making clear Daniel's status was not up for debate. Daniel appreciated her public support even as he processed the private reality. They shared living space but maintained separate sleeping quarters, functioning more like formal roommates than romantic partners. Lyra respected his boundaries, never pushing for intimacy, focused on establishing practical partnership. Gradually, forced proximity led to actual relationship development. Daniel started seeing Lyra as more than the person who coerced him. She was intelligent, managing complex business with skill, carrying the weight of being the last of her family with grace. She was thoughtful about his adjustment needs, supporting his continuing research work, not demanding he abandon his identity. Lyra began seeing Daniel as more than a convenient solution. He was genuinely interesting, approached problems differently, and was making sincere effort to understand her culture. His xenoanthropology expertise was actually helpful in her business dealings. 2 months in, they had their first real argument. Daniel had been contacted by human authorities asking for a detailed account of his situation for a case study. Lyra was uncomfortable, arguing that making their private bond a public diplomatic issue was unnecessary. Daniel argued his experience could help other humans understand the risks and potentially lead to treaty modifications. "You want to use our bond as a cautionary tale," Lyra said, her markings showing hurt and anger. "To paint me as a villain who coerced you. I want to be honest about what happened. You did coerce me, that's not debatable. The fact that you've tried to make it tolerable doesn't change the foundation. Under Sireny law, I exercised legitimate rights. That your culture views this differently doesn't make it coercion. The fact that it's legal doesn't make it ethical." They argued for over an hour, neither fully conceding. But through the argument, something shifted. They were actually communicating honestly, expressing genuine feelings rather than maintaining careful distance. The argument ended without full resolution, but with both understanding the other's position better. Lyra acknowledged that from Daniel's perspective, the bond formation was traumatic even if legal. Daniel acknowledged that from her perspective, she was following legitimate customs respectfully. The emotional honesty actually brought them closer. They started talking more openly about their feelings, frustrations, hopes for what their partnership could become. 3 months in, they faced external crisis together. A rival Sireny house challenged Lyra's business contracts, using Daniel's presence as supposed evidence that House Meridian's leadership was compromised by attachment to aliens. Lyra had to defend her interests through formal proceedings, and Daniel found himself supporting her not just from obligation, but because he was genuinely invested. He used his expertise to help prepare her arguments, researched precedents, testified about his capabilities as her partner. They won decisively, with officials ruling Daniel's presence strengthened House Meridian rather than weakening it. After the proceedings, Lyra told Daniel something significant. "When I claimed bond right, I believed I was making a practical choice. I thought we would develop functional partnership at best." She paused. "What we're developing is more than functional. It's becoming genuine, and I value you not just as a partner of convenience, but as someone I actually want in my life." Daniel, surprised by his own response, told her, "I hated you at first, hated the situation, the coercion, feeling trapped, but you've proven yourself to be someone worth knowing, someone worth building something with, even if how we started was fundamentally wrong." "Does that mean you've forgiven the coercion?" "It means I'm choosing to focus on what we're building now rather than just resenting how we started. That's not saying the coercion was acceptable. It wasn't. But I can acknowledge what happened while valuing what's developing between us. It wasn't a fairy tale resolution, but it was honest. They were building something real from coercive circumstances, finding genuine connection despite the problematic foundation." The chapter ended with them agreeing to truly try to build a marriage rather than just maintain a functional partnership. It was a choice Daniel was making freely this time, not because of legal coercion, but because he'd come to value what they were developing together. The following months showed their evolution from obligation to genuine relationship. Daniel continued his research with House Meridian support, publishing work that gained attention in both human and sci-fi academic circles. His unique position provided valuable cross-cultural perspectives. Lyra continued managing her business interests, increasingly consulting Daniel on matters that benefited from his cross-cultural understanding. His presence became an asset as House Meridian established reputation for successful cross-cultural dealings. Their personal relationship deepened gradually. They spent increasing time together by choice, shared meals with hours of conversation, collaborative projects, social events where they functioned as genuine partners. Physical intimacy developed slowly and naturally. When it finally happened, it was a choice they both made freely rather than an obligation, and it strengthened their connection significantly. The biggest challenge came when Daniel received communication from Earth. His younger sister was getting married and wanted him to attend. It meant returning home for the first time, bringing Lyra into human space and his family context. "You should go," Lyra told him. "Your family matters, and they deserve to meet me if we're truly building a life together. They're going to have questions, difficult questions. Then we'll answer honestly. I'm not ashamed of claiming bondrite, even if I understand why you found it traumatic." They traveled to Earth together. Daniel's family's reaction was complicated. His parents tried to be accepting but were clearly uncomfortable. His sister was blunt, so she basically forced you to marry her. Daniel's response surprised himself. "It started that way, yes. But what we have now, that's something I'm choosing freely. The foundation was coercive and wrong, and I don't defend that. But what we've built since then is genuine, and I value it." His family gradually warmed to Lyra as they saw how the relationship actually functioned, not as captor and captive, but as genuine partners. Lyra handled the scrutiny with grace, acknowledging the problematic circumstances while making clear she valued what they'd developed. During the return journey, Lyra asked something that had been on her mind. "If you could go back, knowing what you know now, would you still resent the coercion?" Daniel considered carefully. "The coercion was real and wrong, and I can't pretend it wasn't, but what we've built, I wouldn't want to lose that. So I'm left with complicated feelings of being grateful for the outcome, while still believing the method was unethical." "Do you regret claiming bondrite?" "I regret the harm. I don't regret claiming you, because doing so brought you into my life and led to genuine partnership I value deeply." Her markings showed vulnerability. "But I acknowledge my cultural customs created trauma for you, and I'm sorry for that even as I stand by my legal right." It was as close as they'd come to reconciling the problematic foundation with the genuine relationship they'd built. A year after Daniel's rescue, they were planning renovation of research facilities. They were comfortable with each other in ways that came from time building genuine partnership. Daniel received message from human authorities. Following his case and others, treaty negotiations were establishing clearer protections for humans in sci-fi space. Rescue rights would still be recognized, but with mediating processes to ensure genuine consent. "Your willingness to speak honestly led to this," Lyra told him. "You may have prevented others from experiencing what you did. Does that bother you, that your customs are being modified?" "It bothers me that my culture's customs created trauma for someone I've come to love. If modifications prevent future trauma while honoring rescue traditions, that's positive evolution." The word love was the first time either had used it explicitly. "I love you too," Daniel responded. "Which is strange given how we started, but it's true. What we've built, it's become the most important relationship of my life, even though it began in the worst possible way." They acknowledged the complicated truth. Coercion is never ethical, but sometimes relationships can develop into something genuine even from deeply problematic foundations. Acknowledging the wrong doesn't require abandoning the relationship, and valuing what they've built doesn't require pretending the beginning wasn't traumatic. In the final scene, they reviewed treaty proposals together, Daniel providing human perspective while Lyra ensured Sirene values were respected. They were working as genuine partners, balancing different needs, building something that served both their interests. It started with an impossible ultimatum: become my husband or face consequences. It developed through coercion, compromise, gradual understanding, and eventual genuine choice. Now it was a partnership neither would surrender, built on honest acknowledgement of the wrong that began it, and committed effort to create something better than its origins. Not every relationship that begins with coercion transforms into love. Not every cultural conflict resolves into understanding. But sometimes